My name is Elaine Simon, and Eva Gold and I will be making a presentation for CEPR groups that walks through the Getting to Outcomes guide for measuring the progress and impact of education organizing groups. So we have 3 goals for the workshop. One is that you're going to learn how to use the Getting to Outcomes guide, the theory of action, to help figure out how to measure your impact and your effectiveness as an organization. And then the second goal is really, the purpose of the theory of action is really to help you examine the process of your work, the process of the change effort that you're putting forth. And so essentially what we're hoping, what we intend for the guide to do is to help you connect the dots between the activities that you engage in and the outcomes that result. So connecting the dots is the second goal. And then the last is, and this addresses Quenisha's interest, is how to kind of gear your the findings, gear the outcomes that you have to different audiences, how to kind of address a diversity of audiences to show what your impact is. So those are the goals that we have for the workshop. So we're going to go, first thing we're going to do is go over the theory of change. And the theory of change is, we're going to put it up on the screen. So the figure here is a visualization of our analysis of the work of community organizing groups for education. And we call it a theory of change, and it's represented here as a transit map. And the map metaphor is useful because it shows the different routes in the path of change. The green line on the map represents institutional change, and the orange line represents individual and community change. And as you see, the lines pass through different zones on the map. And within each zone, there are multiple stops, and each of the stops stands for a strategy that groups undertake and the goals that they work towards. So while the map illustration implies a definite sequence, groups can be at different points on the map for different campaigns and will often track back to strengthen their positions. So even though it looks linear, you really should think of it as something that kind of can track back or cycle around. So looking at the map, you can situate where you are in a particular campaign, and what you need to work on, and the points that you might want to make about where you are and what your accomplishments are in a particular campaign. So in the first zone, which is building power, there are a set of strategies that primarily focus on building the strength of the organization and its members. And here you see the green and orange lines run together because as the organization is being built, the members and the leadership is also being developed. So that kind of is a simultaneous process. And then once an organization has created sufficient power, you move to the strategies in Zone 2, taking action. And here, groups engage in public actions that create public accountability, and often in parallel work with to develop relationships with insiders, officials, elected officials, who can who have some power to make decisions and to bring about some change in support of your goals. So these 2 activities involve the group's leaders, and they reinforce each other to bring pressure and build momentum towards the outcomes in Zone 3, the education wins. And you'll notice that the orange line then moves down to the transformational change. So you'll see that it kind of splits off from the green line there, because what we're trying to show is that by participating in both the organizational development and in taking actions, transformational change can occur for individuals and communities, even if education wins don't occur. So that's why the orange line kind of runs to the end. But in Zone 3, these are the education wins. And we have them divided into these 3 areas: increasing resources, changing policy and practice, and increasing the openness of governance, or the democratic nature of governance. And you can think of these kinds of changes as happening at different levels. So they can happen at the school level, they can happen at the district level, the state level, even the national level. And then eventually the work of education organizing moves into the last zone, transformational change. And clearly this is a long-term goal, and oftentimes it's the result of multiple iterations of the process of change. So it's not something that's easy to get to, and it's sort of an accumulated kind of change. But once some of those transformations begin to happen, then it kind of resets the beginning. And even though, again, the lines kind of end at the right-hand side of the page, you should think of them as coming back around to the beginning and resetting the stage, or kind of recalibrating things, and so that each subsequent campaign, hopefully you're starting on a more strong basis. So that's the sort of the way that the theory of change works. And Eva's going to walk through a specific example to illustrate it.
So our hope is that the theory of change can actually help you tell your story about your organization and its work. So I'm going to take a risk and try to tell a story using this, drawing on the Philadelphia experience. So I want to tell a story about state funding that's relevant not only in Pennsylvania but across the country. So I actually want to start in the transformational change zone, Zone 4. And the reason I want to start here is we're in Philadelphia building a campaign right now around state funding, but we're not starting from zero. We're starting from decades of work around a funding struggle. And so many of your organizations have actually had wins and been organizing, building power around this, and have actually made some gains. For instance, I would say one of the gains is, if you look at the transformational side, is getting to equity is a conversation. There's debate about what it means, but you've made it visible and a conversation. I would also say that there's been somewhat a shift in the balance of power, in that there is obvious recognition, at least at the district level, if not at the state, but probably growing at the state, that the voices of community, youth, and parents are going to play a role in this. They can't just be, overlooked. So you're not starting from nowhere. So wrapping back around, we didn't get sustainable change in the past. So in a sense, you have to launch a new campaign in a new era. And I would say right now, you're in the 2 zones that Elaine identified, Zone 1 and 2, as the organizing process. You're once again building your base around this issue. You're expanding the knowledge of people around what the issue is, the need for costing out study, the need for a new state formula that is equitable and is implemented fully. So you're building knowledge, you're building leadership and base. You're also building your coalitions and alliances again, both in Philadelphia, for instance, PCAPS, a coalition for which this is a priority, but there are other coalitions you're working with around this, both in Philadelphia and statewide. So you're rebuilding that capital, that social capital, that network you need in order to bring about action. I wouldn't say that you're just at Zone 1, because through your lobbying and other visits, rallies in Harrisburg, you're also cultivating insider allies, both locally and at the state level, to push this forward. And at the same time, you're building a campaign to create public accountability by holding every candidate for the governor accountable for promises to enact equitable funding and fair funding for places like Philadelphia and all the other areas in Philadelphia and in Pennsylvania that have been underfunded. So you're in that process. What you would be looking towards is gaining wins in establishing and expanding resources for the Philadelphia schools. That would be a policy win, but then probably the campaign would circle back because you would need to make sure it was implemented in both the district level and school level, right? And you would need to also circle back and ensure that the way in which it was implemented represented a step forward in democratic governance, that youth and parents and community had a voice in how the implementation took place and in monitoring the implementation. When those kinds of things happen and work together at the state, the district, and the school level, then transformational change can be anticipated where you do achieve a greater state of equity. Not that there still won't be problems and you'll still might need yet another campaign, but it would be sustainable and you would have a more equitable system in place. So that's the idea of this theory of change, to give you a tool that can help you tell your stories and can be a shared language with funders or educators or the media, that you can point out these stages clearly and walk them through, and where you are and what you're doing at any particular moment in time. So now I want to turn to the chart. So in your books, if you turn to page 21. So we didn't end with the theory of change. What we did was develop a set of charts that can help you write more specifically about your accomplishments. And these charts are tightly linked to the theory of change, okay? And I'm going to tell you how you read these charts. Good. So if you look at the charts, every chart, first you're going to see in the left-hand corner a number. And that's going to tell you the step of the process that you're looking at. Then you're going to see the title, which tells you the name of that process. And under that, you're going to see a very short definition of the process. Under that, in a gray line, what you see is your strategy. And then for every single strategy, you're going to see indicators. You're going to see an evaluative question. Now, this evaluative question is a sample, but it'll give you a start on how to ask an evaluative question about this area. You'll see a set of measures, and then you'll see data sources for how to collect information about these measures. Okay, now if you turn to page 21, developing leadership base. Okay. This is in the building power. We're going to look a little more closely at developing leadership and base. That's your strategy, right, under building power. And then you have 3 indicators: numbers, knowledge, and skills. And under each of those, there's an evaluative question as well as your measures and your data sources. And you will find that for every single strategy. So in a sense, what this chart allows you to do is to link back to your theory of change, the stage you're in, and start to elaborate a description with impacts and outcomes, both process and ultimately wins and transformation, that can help you communicate with either funders or educators or your own base about your campaign and how you're looking at it and how you're measuring your results.